The void. More than a blank canvas, it is a mirror, a dark reflection of the things that come into contact with it. Dreams, fears, emotions, things that in our realm of dust are intangible, but become manifest when colliding with the void. So, when surrounded by the terrors of the Zariman, wanting nothing more than a place where they could feel safe, where they could feel in control, the Tenno that would be known as the Drifter made a wish, and through the void, it was granted. But it's important to get some more context as to how things got to where they are. A brief overview of the events leading up to Duviri's inception. Ages before the Old War, the Orokin Empire explored options on how to address the growing overpopulation crisis of the Origin system. One such path was the terraforming project toward Tau, and afterwards, the first colonization efforts to be helmed by the crew of the Zariman. A full-scale, multi-generational colony ship laden with the splendor and majesty of the Orokin Empire to serve as a herald of the next step of the Orokin's ascension towards godhood, domination of the galaxy, and the stars themselves. But either due to hubris, ignorance, or impatience, the Orokin deliberately ignored the warnings of their scientists and opted to send the Zariman colonists through the void. Faster, yes, but far, far more dangerous. While the void was empty, it had since become known through experience that it was not without its own dangers. The process of conceptual embodiment, dubbed by the Entrati family void scientists, would cause unkept thoughts and emotions to run wild, literally becoming waking nightmares in the ravenous nothingness of the void as it silently combed through the minds of those trespassing through it. It would take a steady and well-disciplined mind to make the journey, something that children and teens are not very well known for. But the Orokin would not be deterred. The ship was safeguarded as well as the Archimedeans and technology of the Empire could manage. Advanced ship shielding to protect against the madness of the void, Vosphine glyphs to replace lost communications during void storms or ship-wide disturbances. Oroworms to swim through the void's depths, catching errant phenomena of conceptual embodiment and devouring it, quarantining it within their hollow domes before it could do significant harm. But all this was not enough. More needed to be done. Thus, Eularia Entrati, daughter of the eminent Albrecht Entrati, sought a more unorthodox solution. The children could not be trained extensively, but they could be educated. Thus, Eularia adopted the role of an author and penned the Tales of Duviri, an allegorical tale warning of the dangers of uncontrolled emotional outbursts. On the surface, nothing more than a fable with authoritarian yet simple morals. But truly, it was a crucial survival guide that the children of the Zariman needed to adhere to, lest the specters of their mind find purchase in the seams of the Zariman's armor, take root, and choke the ship to death. And, as we all know, the ship would inevitably fall. The fall of the Zariman is multi-layered and worthy of its own exploration, but in short, after the frenzy of the chaos consumed the ship and left it stranded in the waters of the void, there was life in the wake. The children, chosen by the void as its envoys, its heralds. Afraid and alone, it preyed upon them, made them an offer they couldn't refuse. Perhaps seeking fresh minds, soft and malleable, with untapped potential and an infinite amount of possibilities flooding from their chronological horizons. Perfect prey for a beast that devours time and thought. And thus, they paid a cost beyond their reckoning. They were safe, but they were also doomed. From here, due simply to the fact that eternalism, non-linear time and space, and the chaos of the void itself, things become much more open to interpretation. Defining things as completely set in stone is a nearly impossible task, so while it may be frustrating to those looking for concrete answers, just know that even more so than my other videos, things pertaining to the void and its effects are much more my own personal understanding than usual, and not the only way to view things. With that said, here is my current take on what happened when the deal was struck. The Tenno was offered a deal by the void, a chance to save them, save all of them, in exchange for a willing link to the world of dust. But the key factor here is all of them. Not the Tenno who made the deal, but all the other children aboard. And in either a cruel twist on the Void's words, or simply because the Void, viewing time not in a singular and recognizing other possibilities as distinct, split the Tenno's timeline into two. All other versions of the Tenno that made the deal would go on. But the Drifter was not spared. They were left alone aboard the Zariman. And with desperation of their situation setting in, they retreated to the only place they still had control, their mind. Their imagination, filled with dreams of kings and monsters drilled into their heads by the constant teachings of the tales of Duviri through Cephalon Melica, led them to dream of control, of safety, of a kingdom of their own creation, where their rule was law and their world was safe. Their need for safety birthed Duviri, and their need for control gave them the leading role on the new stage, the Dominus Thrax. For a non-specific amount of time, as time on the threshold of dust and void has little meaning, the Drifter, as Thrax, ruled. Their kingdom flourished, safe from the protection of the Dax, based on the same noble warriors from the Tenno's youth before the Zariman, loyal to their new lord. Within this haven in the void, the characters from the Tales of Duviri came alive. Simple background characters took on lives of their own, learning and growing through what would become an endless cycle of experience. A grand stage with actors of the Dominus' own creation, telling their favorite stories again and again. Most notably among the characters were those prominent in the original tale by Eularia, those that embody the Dominus' emotions, independent even more so than the other characters of Duviri, for as the lesson of the Tales of Duviri states, the key weakness of the Dominus was his inability to control his emotions. First, there is Mathila, the harbinger of joy. She lives a simple life on her farm, happy with her children Coral and Barris, her unending optimism forcing her to ignore the existential threats besieging Duviri and the tragedies it incurs. Then there is Bombastine, the covetous courtier, a talented performer and orator in his own right, but forever wanting more, wanting to become closer to the king, to become the king of Duviri, and to usurp his greatest rival and secret love interest, Lucinia the soprano. Similarly, seeking greater power is Loden, the Prince of Fire, furious at the failings of the king and the feeling that he was denied his rightful place on the throne as the true heir of Duviri, believing he could be a far better ruler, and in truth, were it not for his blinding fury, he seems to act out of a genuine desire to protect and maintain Duviri. In a poetic interpretation of his words and embodiment of emotion, he is the manifestation not just of anger, but of self-hatred, hating the king and himself distinctly, though they are one and the same. Then of course is Lucinia, the sorrowful soprano. Her grief from Bombastine's cruelty and the fall of Duviri from grace fuels her sadness, which inspires greater performance. Her art is emboldened by her suffering, and she begins to wallow in it, falling into an all-too-common spiral of self-pity and pain. And last of the emotional avatars is Sithel, the fearful conspirator. While in the original tale her actions were those of a misguided and paranoid mind, in Duviri as it exists, her fears are far more understandable. For while most in Duviri are ignorant or uncaring about the void, Sithel is fully aware of how dangerous it can be, and sees where it seeps in through the cracks in the wall. She does not comprehend the true nature of the void or the scope of its influence, but knows that she exists in a frail space, crushed from all sides by the infinite weight of a malign power. And while not one of the key emotional embodiments, there is also Acrithis, A self-proclaimed archivist of Duviri, she maintains the last records of the kingdom's lost islands, those cast off by the king or taken by the void. Her thirst for knowledge has given her a keen interest in the Drifter, as their presence across two planes of existence is of great intrigue to her. Familiar tales, predictable outcomes, and the freedom to rewrite the script should they desire it, Duviri began as the safe haven the Dominus had created it to be. In its days of splendor, Duviri was a sprawling kingdom, formed of the Dominus's dreams and ambitions. The glittering Lake Varula, a place of celebration and natural beauty, the simple and relaxing Galleria with statues of pristine marble, the caves of Academe, where all the children of Duviri would learn and become educated in a similar manner to the upbringing the Dominus had in another world. The vineyards of Manipura Island, where Calaventi vintners would make wine that all the Dax of the kingdom would share and recount their tales of glory and conquest. And of course, the aptly named Cornucopia, named for its verdant fields and bountiful harvest that kept the kingdom happy and fed. So bright was Duviri in the void that it drew in outsiders, only two, yet to stumble onto any spot in the void by happenstance is notable. First was a strange man, a scholar. From his description, it was likely Albrecht Entrati, embarking on one final voyage long after he had written the Requiems to atone for what he had unleashed into the universe, or as a stubborn echo of some lost passage in his palimpsest, where he was not afraid of what he had created, but moved to action by it. Or, perhaps as Albrecht feared in his Requiems, the true Albrecht, swapped in the struggle with the other. Once in Duviri, this Albrecht created a laboratory with the Dominus's permission, likely stirring memories in the Dominus that he could not fully recognize. The island Albrecht built upon would become known as Scholar's Landing, the laboratory mirroring one he claimed he owned in another life. In time, Albrecht would again vanish, but he left behind the claim that Duviri was needed for some grander purpose. The other visitor to Duviri was the old monk Teshin, arriving long before he would fall into the void in the world of dust, for time in the void is non-linear and overlaid. He would be nursed to health by Mathila after his encounter with Ballas and Era, and would grow old in solitude within Hermit's Landing until his meeting with the Drifter much later. As an aside, it is not entirely clear how the people of Duviri age. Most information indicates that they do not, and they are simply timeless, with any memories of younger days implanted as part of their constructed backstories. Though not considered a visitor in the same manner as the others, the ancient trader Kullervo would also be drawn to Duviri. So violent was his rage and guilt that he would write himself into the story of Duviri, becoming a part of it, forming his own chapter from the guilt-ridden past he had left behind in the world of dust. Kullervo's history is worthy of its own examination, but that is for another time. While most of the islands of Duviri were peaceful and filled with splendor, the Dominus also gave birth to islands reflecting the darker aspects of his mind. Many of these darker islands are only mentioned in furtive whispers, described by the horrors they inflicted upon those laid to rest in the graveyard within the Netherbarrow region. The island of Lorne, where the remnants of the Dominus's guilt took on literal form, screaming accusatory ghosts, mirroring the regrets of what had happened aboard the Zariman, still clinging to the psyche of the Dominus. These ghosts are likely the Luminous we encounter. Their name is a bit perplexing, but leads me to believe they are lingering negative feelings trapped within the threshold between dust and void. Formed as the literal demons the Dominus carried with them from their time on the Zariman, but not fully extant. A sort of half-conceptual embodiment, as the Dominus attempts to disassociate himself from the world of dust. Similarly, Necropolis Island, where even as the Dominus, the Tenno carried the memories of the friends they had lost aboard the Zariman. Handmade imitations of the rotting corpses of their schoolmates and crew members, enshrined for the Dominus to mourn, as their true forms lay in a place where the Dominus dare not return. Thrax, in an effort to control his kingdom and the tumultuous nature of his mind from his other life, maintained his stage with an iron fist. But in time, the stage began to falter. Some islands were cast out on a whim by the Dominus in a fit of raw emotion. Manipura Island was one such example, where the Calaventi Merchants' Sisterhood, growing beyond the bounds of the loyal characters they began as, spoke of treason towards the Dominus, who crushed them in a fury through an Auraworm's rampage. Other islands, however, were lost due to outside influence, for Duviri was not extant within its own unique space. It was a bubble, a stent, a narrow hallway puncturing the wall, and a perfect bridge for anything trapped on the other side to use. It rested precariously upon the Undercroft, a direct access to the chaos of the void, where the borders of Duviri grew dangerously thin. Here, the Thrax Grineer would be discovered, furious, violent, chaotic specters likely formed from lingering torment of Grineer soldiers who fell in the war that had not yet come, seemingly carved directly from the Wall of Lok itself and cast wayward across time to be eventually recovered by the Dominus. Clusters of raw negative emotion, aptly named trauma clamps, coalesced from negative emotions and festered within the Undercroft, bearing a similar appearance to the material the Void Angels are formed from, perhaps indicating that Void Angels are made from raw, unfocused conceptual embodiment, a slag of thought and feeling. Orokin constructs left to patrol the Void also burst forth from the Undercroft. Lake Virula was drained as a horde of golden maws consumed its fauna and hollowed its core from a hidden breach to the Undercroft. Despite the best efforts of the Dominus to weed them out, they patrol Duviri still, feeding upon it in what was likely their original intended purpose, to consume bits of conceptual embodiment that float throughout the void. Ghosts of the future yet to be and regrets long past lingered in the Undercroft, and even the Dominus avoided it after a time, terrified of what might be waiting to strike from its depths. This fear brings us to a place that was once within Duviri known as Watcher's Island, a seriglass lighthouse in the void, shining out into its infinite depths. Its keeper, Garmy, husband of Mathila, maintained it with pride, for he believed it was not a beacon, but a shield, keeping something unseen at bay. It stood against the dark for an age, until across space and time, Artena would free Rel from his endless task of holding the void's gaze within himself. Rel was put to rest, but the void was freed. It cast off its chains, creating a void storm unlike any Duviri had seen. It was unleashed, and a mere lighthouse could no longer keep it away. The reign of chains marked the beginning of the end for Duviri, as now the void was able to assault it fully. Garmy, among others, were killed in the chaotic storms. A true, final death beyond the bounds of Duviri's script, murdered outright by an unseen audience member. In his final log, Garmy notes a monstrous form approaching from within the storm, a single hand missing 2 of its fingers. Garmy was married to Mathila, and tragically, as her character of joy demands, she is unable to mourn for him. His death goes against the script, and she is quite literally unable to reckon with it. In the wake of the Reign of Chains, the horrors of the Void assaulted Duviri with a frenzy. Strange imitations of the children in the caves of Academe appeared, lingering in their classes and then growing in number as they mimicked even the adults in their youth. The Dominus did not even have a chance to destroy the island before it broke free of its own accord, returning to the Void for it to feed upon. Duviri was a cyst, growing on the calloused, ossified face of the Void's threshold, and as it festered and grew, it began to bleed. The Ichor of the Wall, perhaps even Kuva carrying the Void's consciousness, flooded into its space, poisoning the crops of the cornucopia, drowning the people of Duviri with madness. The Void literally scratching at its weeping wounds, pushing through the rotted Void flesh as manifestations of withered, reaching digits, clawing, grasping for a way out, a way in, sundering the peaceful splendor of the Galleria and dooming it to be cast into the depths of the Void in terror by the Dominus. It is important to understand the nature of the wall. The man is not outside the wall. He is in the wall. But not only is he in the wall, the man is the wall. The malice of the Void is not some singular entity residing within, it is the Void in its entirety. A vast consciousness without clear dimensions that becomes tangible as the dust of our reality's possibilities settle upon its deep, still waters. Where our potential reality meets the nothing, it sinks, until eventually something floats and becomes solid, ossified, a wall of bone, etched with the knowledge from our world of the real that has taken root upon it, the wall of Lok, filled with arcane, rotting marrow. and it is here that it is best to explain the palimpsest of space-time. Written by Eularia and Albrecht, it is one of the most important pieces of information to understanding how the current timeline in Warframe works. A palimpsest is a writing where the original has been removed or effaced and written over. The key understanding here is that it is not a separate page. It is the same, but overwritten. The palimpsest of space-time states that previous timelines, possibilities that had solidified upon the Wall of Lok, are not gone. They can be dimmed, eroded, written over, but not erased entirely, just as the faint markings of an erased sentence may yet linger upon the page. And while the Wall of Lok is solid, it is not entirely unmalleable. One may return to a spot upon its surface and scratch away the old runes, carving a new reality. There are no alternate timelines, just those still present enough to be seen beneath the latest etch. And this is what the man in the wall did to the Drifter, rewrote a future where they escaped the Zariman directly atop the one where they remained, leaving the Drifter to linger in the margins of their own space-time, a possibility not undone, but diminished, parallel, faint. The cyst of Duviri drew the searching hand of the void to its edges, and the claws began to scratch, to tear away at the surface and reach through into the wet. In the scars, it left something behind. A stranger, a wanderer, yet one familiar, one with missing extremities who finds the humor in everything. The man in the wall has not yet fully broken into Duviri, but he has made himself an actor upon its stage. And as the Dominus was faced with the horror of realizing he was merely a parasite upon some grander organism beyond his comprehension, he did what many others might. He withdrew inwards. He excised the portions of his domain that had become rotted, narrowed his borders. He drew tight the walls around him as a child would clutch at the edges of a blanket. He would not flee and leave this haven as others might, because he couldn't. On one side of the wall, the uncertainty of the future, of forging forwards after immense trauma, and on the other, a hunger so deep, so immense it could never be sated. Truly a choice that the Dominus could never make. It was not in his nature. Or was it? Encircled by flames, a man in a burning building must make the choice to jump or be consumed. Surely there must be a possibility of safe landing. This doubt, this drifting thought of moving beyond the, albeit narrowing, safety of the kingdom began to itch in the back of the Dominus's mind. When is unknown. Perhaps it was always there, just hidden away. But at some point this thought became loud, became impossible to ignore. And in the void, thoughts become real. The Drifter became. An errant wish, a desire to move onwards, to escape the cycle of safety, of comfort, to face the fear of the unknown and escape the certainty of oblivion. A dissident in the kingdom of contentment and predictability. An outlaw. While the Drifter became manifest, it was still in the realm of Duviri, and Thrax's word was law. This thought was quickly seized and contained, executed, put down time and time again. But time and time again it returned, rebellious, daring and ever-present, but still weak. For in a battle between the comfort of the known and the fear of the unknown, the familiar tends to win. To escape this cycle of self-destruction, to allow ourselves to move forward, to escape stagnation, to live, sometimes we need help. Someone to hold out their hand and lift us just a bit higher. And in the Drifter's case, a literal helping hand from the heavens to break the cycle. With the hand of Nata, the Drifter was given a chance to seize control. As a force from the world of dust, it could turn the weapons wielded by the Drifter into tools to rewrite the script of Duviri, letting them create a new ending. The Drifter quite literally fights against their desire to remain safe and secure by rebelling against the Dominus, and over the course of the Duviri Paradox quest, comes to terms with their dual nature and regains the ability to separate from the loop. They cast off the character of the Dominus, accept their trauma, and began to heal. Though the Dominus remains extant within Duviri, as it was merely a controlling aspect of the Drifter's consciousness and not the Drifter in their entirety. But the Drifter themselves still returns to the world of dust, re-emerging into the palimpsest in stark detail, and joining the overlapping timeline of the Tenno that was liberated from the Zariman. This return coincides with the void portal opened by Prakasa, and the actions of the New War quest essentially cause the Drifters' faded position on the timeline to be re-etched, merging them and aspects of their reality into our system, allowing for the Tenno to switch between congruent forms. But this, again, is largely open to interpretation. The outcomes are clear, but the mechanics are, likely intentionally, dense and somewhat inscrutable. And what was the purpose of Duviri mentioned by Albrecht? There are still many questions regarding Duviri, but until the final defenses of Duviri crumble and chaos crosses the gap between dust and void, this is what we know.